Hey there! Today I'm going to show you how webSlinger automates a complete banking workflow, logging in with a password and two-factor authentication, navigating to your checking account, and exporting transactions for a date range you specify. The whole thing runs hands-free once you set it up. This is a sensitive topic. Logging into your bank involves your most secret credentials. Would you trust a company to keep your credentials safe in the cloud? Really? I wouldn't. In building webSlinger, I wanted a system that I would be willing to use, one that didn't require handing over the keys to my bank and brokerage accounts. The system we came up with for webSlinger is shown here. Your browser is in the center. During recording, the webSlinger extension, shown on the left, records what you do in the main tab and replicates it in the validation and copy tabs. It communicates with our server to store session maps and to generate and store automation scripts. When webSlinger comes to a password screen, it hands off the task of entering and submitting the password to keyCocoon, another extension shown on the right. keyCocoon communicates with keyBunker, an encrypted vault app that stores your credentials locally. You authorize keyCocoon to retrieve credentials from the keyBunker vault by providing a master password and setting the duration of the authentication session. This way, your credentials remain local. webSlinger never touches them. They are never in the cloud. keyBunker can store both passwords and TOTP secret keys, which can be used to generate time-based one-time passwords identical to those generated by an authenticator app and used for multi-factor authentication. This tutorial assumes you've already set up keyBunker with your bank's domain and your username, password, and TOTP key. If you haven't, check out the keyBunker setup guide on the webSlinger website. Enough talk. On with the demonstration. On the webSlinger website, we go to the Record tab. Here we fill out a form that tells webSlinger what we are doing. First, the initial URL, the bank's login page. This is where the automation will start each time it runs. Second, the task description. I've written log into the bank, navigate to the checking account, and export transactions for a specified date range and format. Now the goals. This automation has a mix of inputs, navigation, and credential steps. First, input : username, the account number used to log in. For my bank, the account number is used to log in, so that's what we'll put in the username field in keyBunker. Next, provide password via keyCocoon. This is a checklist goal. It reminds us that the password step happens during recording, but the password itself isn't input data. keyCocoon handles it locally every time. Then, provide TOTP via keyCocoon. Same idea, not input data, just a reminder that this step is part of the login flow. After login, we navigate to the checking account and then to the export page. We have two checklist goals for these: navigate to checking account and navigate to export transactions. Then the export form inputs: input from data, start of the date range for transactions; input to data, end of the date range for transactions; input format, the format for the export, OFX or CSV. Next, click Export, the button that triggers the download. And finally, log out. It's a good practice to log out of your bank when you're done. Notice that the passwords and TOTP goals don't use the input syntax. That's because they aren't input data. The values aren't supplied in a data file. keyCocoon retrieves them from keyBunker each time. That's the plan. Log in securely, navigate to the right account, fill in the export parameters, and click the button. Let's record it. I click Ready, then activate webSlinger by clicking the icon on the browser toolbar. Activating webSlinger opens the recording tabs and loads the bank's login page. To be able to use keyCocoon to enter credentials, we need to start a keyBunker authentication session. This authorizes keyCocoon to retrieve credentials from keyBunker for a limited time. See the keyCocoon status icon on the overlay? It's currently showing as not authenticated. I click on it. A dialog pops up asking how long we want the authentication session to last and asking for our keyBunker master password. I'll select 1 hour. That's plenty of time for recording and executing the script. Now I enter the master password and confirm. I press Escape to close the dialog, and now the keyCocoon icon turns green and shows Authenticated after a short time. keyCocoon is now authorized to access our stored credentials for the next hour. Now let's proceed with the login. Our first goal is to provide the user ID, which is the account number. I click the Input button on the overlay. webSlinger found the input fields on the page. The user ID is a text input, so it's outlined in blue. The login button is a submit input. It's outlined in gray. I right-click on the input box. In the context menu, I enter the account number as the value and click Record. The validation log confirms the username was entered. Now we have to click on the Login button. We can do this in 2 ways. We can click off the input overlay and then click on the Login button normally, or we can right-click on the button and click Record to submit. I'll do the latter. The page updates to show the password field. I click the Input button to toggle the input overlay back on. The password field is now highlighted in red. I right-click in the input box, but instead of entering a password, I click Authenticate with keyCocoon. keyCocoon queried keyBunker, which looked up the credentials for this domain and username, found a match, and returned the password over an encrypted channel to keyCocoon. keyCocoon decrypted the password, filled in the input, and submitted it, then immediately expunged the password from its memory. Now the page transitions to the two-factor authentication step. My bank has given me a choice to use either an authentication app or email MFA. I'll click on the Authenticator app, as that is what keyBunker emulates. This takes us to where we can enter the TOTP code. The process is the same as entering the password. We click the Input button on the overlay, then right-click on the TOTP code field, highlighted in magenta. Now we click on the Get TOTP Code from keyBunker button. keyBunker generated a fresh TOTP code from the secret key for the account, filled in the box, and submitted. We're now logged in and on the bank's account page. The validation log confirms the TOTP request. That's the entire login, handled securely. No credentials stored in scripts, no passwords visible to webSlinger servers, no credentials in the cloud. Now we need to navigate to the checking account and then to the transactions export page. I click on the checking account. The validation log confirms the navigation. Now I need to find the export option. First I click on More, then I click on the link to export transactions. Here's the export form. We can see the fields for the start date, end date, and file format. This is where our remaining input goals come in. I click the Input button on the overlay. I right-click on the Start Date field. I enter a date value, say 1/1/2026, as the example value for from date, and click Record. Confirmed. Now the to date. I right-click on the field, enter 1/31/2026 as the example value, and click Record. Now the Format drop-down. I right-click on the Format drop-down. The context menu shows the available file formats. I'll select OFX file and click Record. All 3 export imports are confirmed in the validation log. Now we just need to click the Export button. If we toggle off the input overlay and click the Export button normally, both the main and validation tabs will download the transactions. I don't need 2 copies, so I'll right-click on the button and select Main tab only and click Record. Note that either method results in the same automation script, which will only download a single copy of the transactions. But imagine you had a workflow where the file you were downloading was enormous. In that case, you would definitely want to avoid downloading 2 copies during recording. We see that a download was initiated. I'll log out of my bank before recording the session map. I click Save, give it a name, and the session map is stored on the server. We're done recording. Back on the webSlinger website, we go to the Generate page to turn our session map into a runnable script. Step 1. Select the session map we just recorded. Step 2. Name the script. The task description looks good. Step 3. Metadata review. webSlinger has matched our recorded inputs to our goals: username, from date, to date, and format. Step 4. Input data structure. All 4 inputs are single values, not arrays, so we don't need to check any boxes. We want one login, one export, for one date range. Let's generate the script. This will take a moment. The script is ready, and webSlinger has prepared an input template. Let's download it. Here is the input template. It's pre-filled with the values we used during recording: the account number, the date range, and the file format. To run this automation for a different month, we just change the dates. To export in a different format, we change the format value. Let me save this as is for now, since January 2026 is what we want. Now to the automation page. I select the script, upload the input data, and click Ready. webSlinger confirms everything is in order and tells us to activate the extension. We're still in the authentication session time window for keyBunker, so keyCocoon will be able to fill the password and TOTP. If we run the script later on, after the session has expired, keyCocoon will prompt us for the master password when it tries to service the password request from webSlinger. Here it goes. webSlinger navigates to the login page, enters the account number, requests that keyCocoon fill in and submit the password. Then it does the same for the TOTP code. We're logged in. Now webSlinger navigates to the check-in account, opens the export page, fills in the date range and format, and clicks Export. The file downloads automatically. The entire login and export workflow completed hands-free. We're done. The transaction file downloaded successfully, an OFX file covering January 2026. We can now import this into our accounting software. If we want to load it into a spreadsheet instead, we can change the format in the input data to CSV and run the script again. Let's recap what just happened. We showed webSlinger the login and export workflow once. keyCocoon handled the sensitive parts, the password and the authenticator code, keeping the credentials local. The session map captured the navigation pattern, the script generation turned it into automation, and the execution ran the whole thing with just the input data we provided. Next time we need transactions for a different time period, we just update the dates in the input file and run it again. No re-recording needed. That's webSlinger with keyBunker, secure, automated banking workflows without exposing your credentials. Head over to webslinger.ai to try it yourself. Thanks for watching.